if this project goes sour, then you're the one that's getting fired. And I told him, I said, well, I was looking for a job when I found this one anyway.
I think you describe why people don't change though, Dave. I mean, I really do.
Greetings, Peter Dyke here from the Alliance for PE Pipe. Welcome to another edition of the Alliance's podcast program, where today my colleague Dan Landy is with me. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Pete, I'm excited for this one. New guest and new topic, both on the same day, right?
Yeah, exactly right. I've been wanting to do this interview with Dave Stewart for a couple years now, and he and I finally got together to plan it. So I'm excited about that. But I'm also excited about your Steelers and not so much my Bears.
Wow. I mean, you never stop an enemy in the middle of a mistake. I don't want to talk about anything happening. I don't want this even more so to be recorded and put online. So, um, just like the Alliance, good things are happening. Just let them happen, you know?
And don't talk about them.
Don't put that
Uh,
into that space.
yeah. Well, hey, back to the basics here. This podcast program, Dan, for us is brought to the industry by WL Plastics. You know, Richard Colasa has been a mainstay of the Alliance's programming now for 12 years. And WL has been incredibly supportive of the Alliance over those years, and in particular, the podcast program.
Yeah, I just got off the phone with Dusty Langston as well. We're getting ready for that presentation and showcase where, WL, thank you again for being a platinum sponsor. That 9 markets to find. And, just when you talk to those guys, it's easy. We operate in this municipal world and, they're operating in 9 different worlds out there daily. So they bring a lot more to the table than we could ever ask for.
Well, yeah, and our guest today, Dave Stewart, is also speaking on inspection strategies at Showcase. Very excited about that. We also have Harvey Svetlik coming in to help with the ductile iron versus polyethylene talk. Tell us about the favorite talk you're looking forward to.
Mine's redneck engineering because so redneck engineering, it's a term coined by Core Main's Jeff Cole, who does have an engineering degree. But he always says, he has a PhD in redneck engineering. So, uh, you know, you can you could put a job perfectly on drawing sets, but things are always going to happen in the field. And Jeff, Chris Waite with C-Core, and Ryan Ruiz of ISCO are all going to be walking us through that topic of, really the stuff that how things get done that kind of makes specifying engineers toes curl, but they're doing it the right way. It's behind the scenes stuff that, it's very, very undersung heroes.
Yeah, so it's how we get polyethylene to actually go in the ground, the stuff that doesn't show up in the plan set.
Yeah, it's like that, was it maybe a few brave men or a few good men? When Jack Nicholson says, you don't want to know how I do what I do. You're just glad that it works.
Yeah, you're just glad that I'm there while you're sleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, let's get to it. Dave Stewart, are you there? Welcome to the Alliance's podcast program.
Hi, Peter. Hi, Dan.
Dave, I was just saying, I was giving my good buddy Jeff Cole a shout out. He taught me butt fusion and you taught me inspection. Very fitting. I
So,
only learn from the best.
Dave Stewart, you and I met probably a decade ago, and you kind of made your mark in the polyethylene world because you were working at that time for Lago Vista. But before we get into Lago Vista, Dave, tell us, who you are, where you live, what your story is.
I'm Dave Stewart. I live in Lago Vista, Texas, which is just outside of Austin on Lake Travis. And uh, we had a really low population density of like 346 people per square mile, but the water pipes to serve that square mile, which gave us a huge water loss percentage of about 35% or so. So we were trying to figure out ways to reduce water loss, and one of the most obvious was getting rid of bill and spigot pipe and going to HDPE pipe. And we started using it around 2007 and 2009. Uh, the city officially converted both all of its new water, wastewater, and reuse water lines to HDPE pipe.
So not only did you live there, you worked for the municipality. Is that right?
Right. I was the assistant director of public works and in charge of the capital improvement programs, which meant I ran all of the new piping jobs.
Got it. And at that time, you were, I'm not going to say you're a pioneer because Texas is our second most active polyethylene state in the union, but you were kind of a pioneer.
Well, fortunately, the oil field was using NFS 61 approved piping,
Mm.
and we had to adapt the oil field uh,
Cowboys.
yeah, cowboys.
Yeah,
We
they
basically
really are.
adapted the oil field piping systems into our water use and managed to hook up with a couple of suppliers. And we told them, hey, this doesn't work. Can you make these fittings for us? Um, we need to fabricate some repair fittings and stuff. And we'd send in a design, and like Harvey Sweatlake would do the final work on it and send us back products, and we would beta test. And then uh, when the workload overran our in-house capabilities, we started hiring out, and we had a couple of contractors that learned like we did at the same time, and we taught each other until we both became very good at putting the pipe in. And since we were developing all our own installation stuff, uh, procedures and everything, it sort of put us on the cutting edge, and where we became, if you want to know how to put it in, call Lago Vista because they're doing it right now.
Yeah, pretty cool. And in the oil field, they value that crude oil, so they put it in pipes that don't leak.
Well, our original pipeline was a wastewater line that was about 150 feet away from the lake. And the
Oh,
local lake authority required us to use HDPE pipe for the sewage system because they wanted absolutely no possibility of sewage leaking into the lake. And when I was inspecting that job, I asked the contractor, says, well, if this is so great for sewage because it doesn't leak, I have a high water loss. Why can't I use it for water lines? And they say you can, but nobody will.
I'm sorry, Dave. Who asked that? Who's asking that question? The mayor?
No, the supplier to the contractor
Okay.
for the let me try that again. The contractor was using a local HDPE supplier,
Gotcha.
and the supplier representative came out, and I asked him why I couldn't use that pipe for water, and he goes, "Well, you can, but uh, nobody wants to or will." And I said, "Well, watch me." And in 2 years from that, I converted the city over to using HDPE for water, wastewater, and reuse.
so was that a decade ago?
2009, 15
Okay.
years
So
ago.
15 years ago. So Dan, for you young people listening, um, it seems counterintuitive that it took the water industry so long to get to this point, but it's because of guys like Dave Stewart and many others that Camille Rubias has developed over time, or educated before the Alliance got here. But Dan, we being the industry, we went after the oil field and the natural gas markets, which for us, it was the low hanging fruit. I mean, let's go after the stuff that's easiest first, right? And it wasn't until 2008 that the Alliance was started. So this educational program began. So all these other municipalities didn't have to learn about it like Dave Stewart did. So that was a thing, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, still, I know the distributors won't, won't openly say it, but they like those margins, right? I mean, the oil and gas mandates it. They do well in that industry. Water, much more competitive, right? Dave, I do have a question for you. Did you have like a buyer's remorse moment, right? Because you were the guy that said, "Hey, let's go, Paulie, right? We don't care what everyone else is doing. This is the best approach. Let's do it." Did you have that like first initial moment, like a year or two in, or maybe something didn't go well, or there was a learning curve you weren't expecting? What was that, and kind of when did you come across that?
But by the time we made the decision to convert, I've been working with the pipe for a couple of years. And when I finally sold the city manager on doing a total conversion, he told me that if this project goes sour, then you're the one that's getting fired. And I told him, I said, well, I was looking for a job when I found this one anyway.
I think you describe why people don't change though, Dave. I mean, I really do. Maybe a better approach is out there, but I mean that you had a very nice cushy position at Lago Vista. I mean, correct? For you to
Cushy.
risk it?
We did a lot of work. Um, on my watch, we put in over 90 miles of HDPE pipe, anywhere from 2 inch up to 24 inch. Uh, Took our water loss down from 35.5%, and the last report I saw earlier this year was 6.5%. But about 75% of the water distribution system is uh, fused HDPE. The 25% that's still legacy, if you basically what I tell them is, we know the HDPE isn't leaking, so that 25% is accounting for all 6.5%, which means that it must have a leakage rate of like 25% for the math to work out right. So it's
Yeah.
just a motivation. We're now looking at going back and starting to replace the 40-year-old pipes. Um, they need to be upsized for one, for better fire protection, but with only 25% of the system in legacy and everything brand new being built with HDPE, we're well ahead of the curve.
Boy, I'll say that's impressive. Dave, you've got 40-year-old pipe on the legacy, so the last 25%, is that PVC or ductile iron?
Uh, there's one section of ductile iron left, but I got probably 80% of it replaced before I retired. Um, and it's on the list to be replaced. The biggest problem we have right now is AC pipe. Of course, the PVC pipe is uh, Schedule 35 or Schedule 40, with the later stuff being C900, and it'll hold up. But AC pipe will be 50 years old in 2028. And what we're noticing, particularly under roadways, is it's starting to egg shape. It's actually going to collapse because it's lost its strength. So I would say probably it's 50-50 between plastic pipe and AC pipe.
Well, they've got their challenge. And how many miles total in the system?
Oh, when I started, it was somewhere around 80 or 85 miles, and it's probably 185 or 190 miles now.
Wow. So, yeah, I mean, you're in the Austin area. You're growing like a weed up there. Um, hey, this Lago Vista stuff is really important, but I want our audience to learn a little bit about this passion that I know you have for World War II and your family history associated with it. And you were kind enough to share that book with me, which I haven't gotten through yet fully, but I got to tell you, that's pretty fascinating from one history buff to another. Tell us a little bit about that process and your dad's history, and what's up with the book.
Well, my father was captured by Rommel in Tunisia in 1943 on Valentine's Day. And his POW number was 1582, which means he was the 1,582nd person captured by the German army, which meant he watched World War II go by behind barbed wire. But in 1940, the Soviets massacred 23,000 Polish officers and mayors and attorneys and professors and doctors, basically the intelligentsia, and buried them in several mass graves. And the Germans, when they attacked Russia, overran the graves in the Katyn forest. And my dad was selected along with another West Point graduate, Lieutenant Colonel John H. Van Vliet Jr. And they were forced to go to the Katyn forest to witness the International Katyn exhumations. And they came to the independent conclusion that the Soviets had murdered them basically based because the uniforms and the boots weren't wore out like theirs were. And they had been a POW a shorter period of time. And it turned out that both of the men were U.S. military intelligence, MI6 code writers. The U.S. military trained potential frontline troops that could get captured how to send coded messages back, and they could, and they did, and they reported the Katyn massacre. The Polish government gave my dad a medal and Colonel Van Vliet a medal in 2015, which was my first trip to Poland. And over the course of the years, I found some narrow documents, gave it to them, and then they asked me to write a book on it. But being ex-military, I understood all the acronyms. I knew how the security systems work, top secret, how codes work, because I had to decode messages myself, and uh, just happened to be the right place, the right time, and the son of one of the witnesses. So the book came natural. It's being published by the Polish government, and it's half in English and half in Polish. As it deals with each topic, it switches languages.
Well, that's fascinating, Dave. I remember in college reading about the Katyn massacre, and I never really understood, how the Germans ended up getting blamed for it. But it makes sense, right? I mean, if you're the Soviets, you're going to blame it on the Germans. But the Germans, as much as they were at war with the Poles, it would make sense that, because the Germans had their own atrocities as well, obviously, but they weren't murdering Polish officers like the Soviets were.
Well, the biggest difference between between the Germans and the Soviets back in the 40s is that, and this was pointed out in several of the documents in my books, is that the Germans would work an undesirable like a Pole to death, whereas the Soviets would just shoot them and bury them. And that fact alone really pointed the finger at the Soviets.
Yeah, it's crazy. Hey, well, congratulations. I don't know a lot of people that have written books, but you're one of them. And that's so impressive. And then to have that relationship with your dad and his role and the fact that he sent these encoded messages, my goodness, crazy stuff. And who knew you were going to hear about that in the Poly podcast? But anyway, more later. Maybe we'll do a separate podcast just on your work there. But so, Dave, you've emerged from this work at Lago Vista. You've retired from Lago Vista, yet you still live there. But you're like one of the few people that hung his shingle out and said, "Hey, I will inspect your polyethylene job, and I know what I'm doing, and hire me." Tell me a little bit about your business.
Well, I work with Brian Hogger Consulting out of Colorado.
Okay.
He provides the insurance, and sometimes I find the job, sometimes he finds the job. But basically, we're offering a third-party professional HDPE inspection services. We've got several Fortune 500 customers, but by the same token, we have regular municipalities and sometimes just contractors bring us in to make sure they're doing everything right.
And you get called in to do forensic work as well?
Yeah, probably 4 of my last 5 jobs were coming in to fix screw ups, and they were all preventable. Uh, we've been recommending for years now that you need to bring us in while you're writing your specifications. And uh, if you're going to write specifications, particularly with the HDPE side, you need to enforce them. And uh, probably in 3 of the cases, the people didn't test their qualifying coupons until after the pipe had been buried.
Oh, nice.
Well, they wound up digging it back up.
Goodness. Pretty basic stuff. At Showcase, we have something, we're doing a class just on the accountability triad during the deep dive day. And then you're speaking on Friday at Showcase on inspection strategies. You got your own 55-minute section, which I'm excited about because we've never offered that before. Thank you for doing it. If you had, like, what are your fundamental principles? If they bring you in early enough, what does your scope of work look like?
Well, what we're finally getting to happen is that uh, we suggest to the owner that he send his qualifying coupons to me 2 to 3 weeks, no less than 2 weeks before the commencement of production fusions, at which time I will conduct a side bin test according to ASTM F318321. And if the coupon passes, then, we'll go out there on the first day of production and work with them for a couple of days, make sure they got their data logger set up right, that we always suggest that the owner own the McElroy vault, not the contractor, so that the owner has the permanent records and, just, do the general observations. But if we have a qualifying coupon that fails, then we send back a report disqualifying the fuser and will not accept another coupon from them, another dropout that we'll cut a coupon out from until he can provide a recertification certificate, or the contractor can replace them with a different fuser with a new coupon. But if you fail a qualification coupon, you're done with that job until you're retrained.
Why so rigorous? Why don't you give him another chance?
Because it can cost the owner millions.
So one and done.
One and done.
Got it. Okay, so you have this rule 2 weeks before commencement of production fusion. You got to do the qualifying fusion. Do you see the data logger report on that fusion that gets submitted for the qualifying?
Yes.
So you got the data logger report, you got the side bend test, and you have the visual inspection of a bead.
Right. And if it fails, so they have a 2 week period to go put the guy back through training, which usually takes a couple of days. And then they ship another dropout. And if they do it tight, we can get it within a week. And then with his new certificate, and if this dropout coupon actually passes, we have him certified a week before they start production. That's why we try to get all the qualifiers done with enough time so that the owner can have, or a contractor can have a chance to correct.
How do you know the guy's submitting a fusion that he did?
We have the owner collect it and mail it to us, not the fuser.
So there's a third party witnessing the guy's doing the
Basically,
fusion.
it's a semi-chain of custody.
Got it. Very cool. Okay, so you have this inspection practice. I've been active with my organization, the Alliance for PE Pipe, in Austin for a decade, and we just did a road show there last month, Dave, where they encouraged their engineering team and their field teams to attend our roadshow with Ryan Ruiz that Dan mentioned from ISCO, because they're ready finally after 10 years to permit polyethylene in their distribution system up to 36 inches. They've been trialing it for at least 5 years that I know of. And so it's taken that long to get a yes out of the city of Austin, which is the capital of Texas, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. So we're very excited about that. But 2 years ago when we were there, the Tesla plant was in the process of being finished. And I heard when I was down there that you were involved with Austin Water's 18-inch diameter DR11 extension from the city out to the northeast side of town where the new plant was going in. Is that true?
That was a 36-inch down to 30, down to 16, down to 12-inch, 15.5 mile pipeline.
My goodness.
Wow.
What was your role?
I was I ran the qualifying, I ran the coupon test on the qualifying dropouts. And then every 20th fusion on any machine, I would collect a dropout and then run a production QA/QC side bin test on the coupon from the dropout. So we did probably 123 side bin tests on that pipeline.
How many failed?
None.
Okay, so your production, they weren't random, but let's call it, just for the sake of this conversation, the production 20th. So you looked at the 20th fusion from every fusion tech on all those diameters. They'd already been pre-qualified before the job started. And once the job was going, there were no failures.
There were no failures.
So because I educate on this pretty regularly, am I safe to say, based on your statistics, that is generally true across the population of properly trained fusion techs?
On properly trained fusion techs, yes. I've noticed it's a night and day difference. Some contractors have been fusing HDPE pipe together for, anywhere from 7 to 20 years. And you can relax when you're around them because they usually know what they're doing. If you have a problem with them, it's probably because they didn't calibrate their data logger like they should have, which, is a failure, but the owner can override it. And, but generally, there's very few failures on it as compared to a contractor who is just entering into the job market where HDPE pipe is required, and they send somebody to school with no experience. And on my Fortune 500 customers, I'm recommending that they don't let anybody fuse on the job who hasn't fused 20,000 feet, just because of the nature of their businesses. If they have a blowout, they can cost them several to $10 million a day while they try to get the water turned back on.
Yeah, and Dave, that's a question that I, excuse me, that's a question that I struggle with sometimes because, your customers are really high profile, but municipal water is not always necessarily, I guess, running that risk. Um, so Peter and I are often kind of, you don't want to keep contractors out from a job, right? You don't want to exclude them, but you do have to make sure that they can properly do the work. So yeah, it's a little bit more of a struggle in the municipal environment. I understand in your projects, they're putting a lot of money on the line and they need to not lose production.
Well, on the municipal side, I mean, there's getting to be, I'm mainly running into people who have been fusing at least for a couple of years, the companies. But, if you do your qualifying coupons with them, you at least have a baseline that, hey, this passed on the first try. Or if it didn't, then you go into the plan B, you're flunked, you need to recertify, you need to retest. We need to talk about whether or not you're qualified to do this job.
Hmm.
Um, and in some cases, the municipalities will require a McElroy certified fusion instructor to be on site for the first week, and it's added into the process cost. And then, or the construction cost. And when that instructor walks off, then even though the crew is brand new, they should be trained well enough. But your fallback's going to be your data logger. This is the second most common fault that I found in my inspections is they asked me to review data logger reports that are 5 to 7 months old, and then I flunk them. And what are you going to do? You're going to go back and dig it up? If the owner or the contractor, if he's hiring a sub, will do a daily review of the data logger reports and he gets his proper training to where he can read the graphs, then you have a daily process control that indicates that the data logger was happy and it didn't flag anything. I mean, one of my recent failures, the fuser was trained for the first time, but he was trained 7 weeks before he started the job,
Mm-mm.
and he put the pipe together with no bead up.
Oh,
He
God.
did a heat soak 2.5 times as long as a heat soak was to be because he knew he needed a bead. And then when he pushed it together, the plastic was so melted that the insert, the writing on the insert put a brand into the bead. So
Wow.
on that one dropout, it failed 7 times. We failed it for 7 different reasons, and any one by itself was a failure and a cutout. And this guy managed to do 7. I think you take your pick.
Hey, how do you define a dropout?
So when you're doing basically you do a test fusion, and then you cut it a foot on either side of the bead, and then you cut your less than 1 inch coupon out of the middle. So the coupon comes out of a dropout.
Oh, I see. So you're just kind of looking at it as it lays in the fusion machine. Um, before we get into some really good examples of bad procedures, because as Dan and I like to say, we learn more from failure than we do success. I want to ask you, you've seen all these experienced guys doing fusion. What are some of the things experienced guys do wrong, but they still get good beads and good fusions?
Some of them do not have a good track record using rags. Sometimes you'll see paper towels which leave lint, and sometimes you'll see them where they're not using an isopropyl alcohol of a greater purity than 91%. Um, some of them will be using the right rag, but they'll stick it in their pocket and they'll use it 5 or 6 times. Um,
How about this one? Cleaning newly faced pipe.
there's an argument going on with that. Before you face, you got to make sure that you clean the inside of the pipe so you don't have, they didn't drag it through the mud and you got some mud
Yeah.
um, and and then you got to clean the outside so you don't have a mud that the bead can roll into. But uh, a lot of fusers, and it's in the standards this way, is that if you have a clean face and you don't have a wind interference, you can go straight to fusing. But if you got some type of wind blowing, it's not a bad idea to be getting a clean rag and wiping it down with your 91% isopropyl alcohol.
But 2620 doesn't say you should. There,
No, it doesn't say you should, as much as uh, the Plastic Pipes Institute would like to make that a rule. I don't think they're going to get that one to go in the industry.
how about this one? Putting their body in the fusion zone because they can't reach to the other side.
Well, on the bigger pipe, that's going to happen. You just got to open up your jaws enough to where you can get in there and clean it up. Although a lot of the people will get some type of like a Swiffer and put their rag on the Swiffer and clean it.
Yeah, I've seen you're okay with that?
You got to do what you got to do. I mean, as long as your arm isn't contacting the plastic surface, it's still clean.
Yeah, interesting. All right, now what are some of the things that inexperienced people do, like the top three that you've seen out there?
Um, they don't clean the heater plate or the facer.
Or the heater plate basket? How about that?
Well, that too. Usually the baskets are up high though. The next one is that they're a little lackadaisical about pulling the shavings out from underneath the jaws, because it doesn't take much of a breeze to take that lightweight piece of plastic and blow it up when you're pulling your heater and slamming your melt zone together. A little burst of air, and now you've got a contaminant going through your bead, and you have to cut it out. Um, on on uh, on some of the jobs, depending upon what the pipe's being used for, like with gas lines, I encourage them to blow the deck off with a blower before they with the you face and you put the pipe together, then you blow out the area with the blower so you can't get any possible contamination.
Wow, what a good idea. I've never seen a blower on a job site.
Let's see, probably 25 to 30% of my job sites are blowing.
Wow, what a good idea. Dan, we should remember that one.
I like that. Dave, I want to remind you of a lesson you taught me. Well, not remind you, bring it up, but particularly when I'm in Texas, I don't know if you remember, I was really new when you took me under your wing and you said if you know you have rocky soils and you don't see a shake pile, that you know they're just putting whatever that rock they dig up, they put it right back in the trench. Is there any way for an inspector kind of to track, other than physically being there, what rocks are coming out of the soil and kind of what they're doing with them?
Well, in the job you're talking about, they didn't use any bedding, but the fines from the rock saw. And the rock saw was chewing up ledges, which was giving you fist-sized rocks. And, you know, according to the ASTMs, that was not an acceptable backfill, but the owner didn't want to listen. And so on any other job, you have to have a minimum amount of distance between the pipe wall and the trench wall. You have to have a minimum of 6 to 8 inches, depending on pipe size, underneath the pipe. And uh, then right now, on top of the crown, it has to be 50%, although I see that moving to 75% fill because of the load on the crown.
Yeah. So what is it? That's ASTM 2321. Is that what that is?
I think so. It's also in the M55, the AWWA M55. I
Right.
didn't work on that section. I worked on Chapter 9.
Right. All right. Tell us about another cool project you worked on recently that doesn't have an NDA.
Um, well, Lago Vista is replacing a 50-year-old golf course with an HDPE system. It'll be 100% HDPE, which I'm really looking forward to. Of course, nobody's building a golf course in Texas that's not built with HDPE now.
Well, that's what I hear from ISCO, Dave, is that more than 90% of all the golf course irrigation renovations are now polyethylene. 2 decades ago, PVC still had a 50% share, and they've totally lost the golf course market.
Yeah. So one thing we started putting in that some other cities have started copying is on the inside of your ground water storage tanks. Uh, we got rid of the metal risers because they rusted and they were heavy and they had to be supported with clamps to the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And we put in an inner spool, an inner nozzle, and then we took a flange adapter and bolted it to the nozzle, and then ran the pipe to the center, and then up 2/3 of the way, and uh, it was a completely unrestrained tank mixer, which couldn't rust, and 4 men could put in 30 minutes.
Wow.
And the neat thing about it was that when you filled the tank, it floated because it was lighter than water.
Innovation right here in Lago Vista.
I put 4 of those in.
All right, before we close out, what advice do you have for, say, a consulting civil engineering firm or an owner who's considering polyethylene for the first time on a big job that could cause them trouble if it didn't go well? What's your advice?
Well, first of all, they need to find somebody who's been working with the pipe to review their specifications. And we strongly recommend that they write in. Some of my bigger clients require daily side bend tests for each pipe size that they're going to be fusing that day. Some say weekly, and some say every 20th. You need to have some type of a regular schedule to check your productions. And you need to make sure that all your fusers did a qualifying dropout and side bend coupon test. The second thing is do your qualifiers before you start production and leave yourself enough time that you can retrain or replace if you need to. I went on one job where I sat there for 2.5 days while I waited for the guy to get retrained. It's not cheap. I mean, that's why we suggest we do it before, which is why I do the test in my garage now for the qualifiers. Um, uh, you, I would standardize as much as I could. Your workhorses are 17, 13, 5, 11, and 9. We had a customer who was doing a large diameter who talked himself into doing DR19, and he forgot to order the extra 10% and wound up 346 feet short. And by the time he paid for that special run, when he could, if he'd had SDR 17, he could have just gotten it out of a stockpile. But to make that 346 feet, it was 200 feet to calibrate the machine, the production, and then to shut the machine down was another 200 foot away. So he wasted more pipe than he actually bought, which made that pipe very expensive. So standardization uh, is critical. I mean,
so we're we're with you 100%. DR9, DR11, DR13.5 on occasion, and DR17 is pretty much all we deal with, right, Dan?
I would say so. Getting everything outside of horizontal directional drilling, where you could get into a 9, that should be, your bread and butter. But um, those are specialty installations.
Yeah. Dan, any final questions for this very interesting interview?
Yeah, Dave, do you do the tensile pull test ever? I know McElroy has that machine out there that every once in a while people say they prefer it, but I'm less familiar with it.
uh, we're not set up to do that. You need to find a lab. I mean, I can carry a McElroy side bin tester on an airplane with me. I wouldn't try to carry that thing on an airplane with me.
Okay.
Yeah,
mean,
are you doing your own planing of the samples?
yes. I
So
get
you're,
the coupon. I'll get a coupon. I'll get a dropout. I'll cut the coupon out of it. I'll plane it. Then I'll condition it for an hour in a water bucket at, between 72 plus or minus 5 degrees. And then I'll do the side bin test.
okay. Yeah, because we demonstrate that every roadshow, as you've seen. And we now have a video, Dan, don't we, of the entire process, including the planing.
We do, yeah, and it's a simple process, but I see what people find it intimidating. I mean, something very unique to polyethylene.
Yeah, it's a process. But you don't carry a vise with you to hold the sample, do you, while you're working on it, Dave?
No, when we're usually a two-man team to plane, and one guy will hold the coupon with a big pair of pliers so you can get away from the chainsaw, and then we'll cut it out, and then we'll plane it. If we're doing bigger than 18-inch, uh, generally those blades are shot in about 8 coupons, which is absolutely amazing because it's rubber, but the heat from planing the rubber just where it takes the temper out of the blade and it dulls it.
Yeah, plastic.
Yeah, I mean, it probably would cut 100 if you could plane 100 2x4s, but only 8 plastic coupons.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Dave, I'm so excited you took the time to talk to us today and educate us a little bit on inspection and your experience with inspection. Because, we consider this to be super important when we're talking to these municipalities. And, they're going to, 5 years from now, there's going to be 3 or 4 of you guys running around. Right now there aren't that many, but these really big data centers all have polyethylene in them. They're all using polyethylene pipe. And I can see why you're so busy. How do we get a hold of Dave Stewart?
I have a website which is stewarthdpe.com, and my contact information's on there.
Awesome.
And on one of the pages is a list of Plastic Pipe Institute manuals and other manuals, and that you can go look up if you're trying to gather information on whether or not to convert or what might work with your project.
Good. Okay. So that's how you get a hold of Dave Stewart. Dave, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you shortly in Phoenix at the PE Showcase. And Dan, how about a shout out to WL Plastics? Let's hear it for them, huh?
Yeah, thank you guys for the continuing support. Looking forward to they're all contributing to different events to showcase as well. So, always appreciate all the stuff they do for us.
Yeah. All right. That'll be it for now. Our next conversation in the Poly Podcast program will be released in the second week of January. But for now, this is it for 2024. So, Dave Stewart, you closed out the year for us. Great job.
Thank you, Peter.
All right.
See you in Phoenix, Dan.
Can't wait.
Yeah. All right. With that, so long for now. Thank
Bye.
you for listening to the Poly Podcast.